it's absolutely freezing, no matter how warm or cold.
I'm primarily going for the weather, of course.
Yeah.
But it's
Oh wow, it's quite the adventure for a 14-year-old as well.
Yeah, okay, so we started Biip.no, which is basically, it was and still is, a social community for teenagers. And we started this way back in 2005. We started out of our bedrooms, really. I'm a designer, and my friend Bo, he was a programmer. So we had this idea that the web would become social. And back then, the only thing that was really around was called MySpace, and there was a Norwegian competitor called Blink. But we thought that we could make something better. That was like the initial idea. So we started hacking together a concept, and after a little while, we partnered up with a company called Toledas, and we did something which is called a joint venture. So we own 50% and they own 50%. And our contribution would be the work that we put into the project, and their contribution would be some initial marketing. I believe it was 250,000 kroner. So that was kind of the first money that was put into the project. We launched the project in May 2005, and after 1 month we had 25,000 members, and then it kind of started going from there. The second month we had 50,000 members, and then we had 70,000, and all of the growth from starting month 2 and onwards was basically just viral growth, because people had joined and they would invite their friends in, and suddenly we had over 100,000 members, and from there it went bananas. So at the end we ended up with 500,000 members. And then, of course, we sold the company to Egmont and TV2 for a deal which priced the company at 75 million kroner. And that was 3 years after we started. So it went pretty fast. Well, what happened was that as soon as we had started getting critical mass and kind of saw the numbers started accelerating, because the first year of operation we had, of course, 0 in profits, and then the next year we had a revenue of, I believe, 2.5 million, and then we had 9 million, and then we had 18 million. And when we saw that we were going to reach 18 million, we thought maybe it would be a good idea to partner with some big media house like VG or Telenor or something like that, because we really wanted to bring Biip into Sweden and Denmark and a lot of other countries. So we had kind of an expansion strategy, and we believed that if we got somebody else on board, it would be much easier to expand. So yeah, we hired actually a consultancy company which was specialized in selling companies, and they started contacting all these companies for us. So we ended up doing all the hard work, like making our own due diligence documents and stuff like that. But it was basically the consultancy company that we brought in that helped us with all these initial connections.
Yeah.
And they put 250,000 into kind of a marketing budget, an initial marketing budget that we used in 1 month. So that marketing budget was used on actually buying traditional display banners through advertising.com.
Okay.
And I still remember the deal. We paid 6 kroner per click, I think. So 250,000 kroner brought us 64,000 clicks, and we actually ended up converting over 1/3 of those into members. So out of 64,000 people that landed on our website, we converted over 20,000 into members. So it was an insane conversion percentage, more or less 33%, I think. So that was kind of how we got the ball started. And as soon as we got all these 25,000 members, you got to remember that all of them are fresh, all of them are like recently logged in, all of them have a reason to be there. So we saw very quickly that they started interacting with each other, and because we were dealing with teenagers, it was kind of a popularity contest to get as many friends as possible on the social network. And the only way to do that was to invite your friends. So we were kind of one of the first companies that took advantage of the fact that people want to be popular also online. It was only Norwegian, but we had an expansion strategy that also entailed Denmark and Sweden. But after the buyout, we never got around to doing that because we had some very stringent economic goals that we had to deliver. So we were tied up in reporting and trying to just maximize the current website, which was a shame because I think we could have done something bigger than we ended up doing. Well, we came from a reality where we could go into the office whenever we wanted. We didn't have any bosses. We had a cool little office down in Rådhusgata in Oslo. And it was basically just a group of friends coding and designing and doing the stuff that we love to do. And a very good by-effect was that we were earning lots of money. And if you contrast that to being bought out and being put into a very corporate world, it was a very different experience. And after we sold the company, even though we were still kept on contracts working for the company, it really went downhill from there. And I think a lot of that has to do with the culture change that happened more or less immediately after being bought out. We were 3 guys, we got lots of money, and we were put into a setting where we would have to do monthly reports. We had a board to report to. We had to pay a certain fee of lots of it's called koncernbidrag, which is basically a share that you pay to the company that owns you. Lots of stuff that we never really wanted to be a part of was forced upon us. So that made a huge impact on the culture in the company and ultimately also the results of the company. So it's kind of a classic buyout story where you have a company that's running and operating well, and it gets bought up and then it goes downhill. And I think that happens a lot. It taught me that you have to you really have to decide what your goal is. Is your goal to earn lots of money, or is your goal to have a good time and try to earn money doing that? And I think our goal, we weren't really conscious of what our goal was. Looking back, I would say that our goal was to expand into Sweden and Denmark and have a good time doing it. And then we got this buyout offer, and we thought that the money would help us reach those goals. But ultimately, it did the opposite. It tied us into some goals that we had to deliver on, which didn't include Sweden and Denmark. And we spent far too much time doing economic reporting than actually concentrating on building the best possible product. When we got the money, me and my 2 friends, all of us started investing. And to begin with, I started investing on the stock market, and I lost lots of money on the stock market because we were really unlucky. We got all our money roughly 3 months before the financial crisis. So we got all this money and we started investing on the stock market, and those stocks crashed hard just a couple of months later. And we started selling stocks when the stocks were going down, which was a very stupid thing to do. But after that, I kind of went back and thought about it, and I decided that I would never invest into something that I didn't understand, and that was a really valuable lesson for me. So these days, if I invest into something, I have to understand it. I have to know the founders, and I have to have kind of a feeling if I believe in it or not. I don't want to invest in stocks that I don't really understand or know the people that run or whatever. So yeah, I started in the stock market, and then I migrated into seed capital funding, I would say.
Yeah, okay.
A couple of years later.
Yeah.
Well, I think the most important thing, of course, is a good idea. But in the end, the execution is always more important than the idea itself. And that's why I would only invest into people that I know, because I think that the team is always more important than the idea. So I would say assembling a good team is the most important thing when attracting investors.
Okay.
Well, that's a good question. And when we started Biip, we didn't have a single krone either. We were just 3 guys with the idea. And our kind of investment, what we told Talitas, which gave us the marketing money that we needed, was that we would invest our time and our work efforts into the project for free, and they would invest the marketing money of 250,000. So our kind of initial deal with them was that we would invest equivalent work hours of 250,000. And I think if you don't have any money and you want to start to do something, at least show that you're serious with your own time and that you're willing to put time and effort into building something. And ideally try to build it or demonstrate it before asking for money. Because I get approached all the time by people saying, "Hey Erling, I have the best idea in the world. All I need is 100,000 kroner and I'll build it for you and you'll own 10%. And it doesn't work like that, unfortunately. You can't ask people for money without having any kind of proof that you'll be able to do it or pull it off in a good way. So my advice is always build it and then come back to me. And if I like what I see, like just a minimum viable product that you built, then we can talk. And 9 out of 10 times I never hear from those people again. But then, I have a really good example. Just a while back, or 2 years ago, I was approached by a guy who said, "I have a really good idea for a neighborhood software." And I said, "Yeah, it sounds interesting." And I basically told him, "Well, try to build it and then we can talk." And he was one of those guys that actually delivered. So more or less a year later, he called me and said, "Hey, I built the product. You want to check it out?" And I was floored. It was a fantastic product that they had built all by themselves. And then they approached me to kind of to see if I would invest or if we could do some kind of deal. And we ended up doing something. And that just really shows that even though if you don't have any money, at least invest your own time. Try to prove that you're serious about it, because ideas are a dime of a dozen. I mean, there are so many ideas out there and so many people who think that they've thought out the next Facebook. But as I always say, Mark Zuckerberg wasn't the first guy to envision Facebook. There was probably 1,000 Facebook clones in the making or being thought out at the same time as he was building his. But he was one of the few guys that actually built it and built it good. And that's what it's all about, just execution and doing it. So yeah, I would say that's the most important thing. Well, there's a very defined way of doing this, and if you research online, you'll find it. But I'll also tell you now what you should do. The first thing you should do is make a deck, and a deck can be really simple or really advanced. I was once taught, and I still believe in the validity of this, of something called Kevin Rose's 10-pitch slide deck. If you Google it, you'll find it. It's basically 10, 11 or 12 slides in a deck. And it just goes on to describe what's the problem, what's your solution, what's the business idea, how do you make money, what's the team, what are your competitors, how does the market look. and what are you asking for, and what are you willing to give. That's like the basic premise of a good pitch deck. So the first thing you should do after you thought of the next Facebook is just make that pitch deck, and then when you have that, then you can approach people, because I'm very tired of people pitching me without having anything to show me. That happens like 2 times every month probably. Like people call me and say, hey, I had this really cool idea. I don't have anything to show you, but you want to do a lunch. And I'm like, no, I don't have the time for that, because you need to show me that you are invested into this idea. And one way you can do that is by creating a pitch deck, is by researching the competitors. Are there anybody else doing the same? What's the business idea? What are the strengths and so forth? So I would say that would be the most important thing. And when you have that, when you're armed with that, then you can start approaching people. And the best way of being approached is through your network. Like if you see that we have a common friend, I would recommend you talk with that friend first and say, hey, I see that you know Erling. Could you ask him for an introduction or something like that? Because that helps me validate who you are. If that person asking me, if I think that is a shit person, maybe I won't take the introduction so seriously. But if that's someone I trust, I'll definitely meet you. And as long as you have a pitch deck, then there's a real framework for the discussion. So yeah, I would say try to the extent that is possible, go through introductions. But then of course, sometimes you don't have any introductions. Sometimes you don't know that person at all. Then I would say, before like cold calling everybody, I would say cold call the people that are currently working in that space, rather than just calling random investors that you think would invest. I would say try to map out, let's say you're in the food business. Okay, let's try to look at, okay, who's currently in the food business? You could call like Bama, you could call Norgesgruppen, you can call like the biggest industrial players, because a lot of times they have their own investment companies that are usually set up to invest in the space that they are currently in, like the food business. And if not, maybe just some of the directors in those companies are looking to invest in the market they're currently in. So I would say that's kind of a much better approach than just cold calling somebody from nowhere and just saying, hey, I have a really cool business idea. But I mean, usually people in Norway are always willing. It's not like in Silicon Valley where you're approached like 100 times a month. In Norway, you're approached maybe 1 or 2 or 3 times a month. So usually people will look at your pitch deck anyway. At least that's my experience. I think the only thing that the pitch can do is accentuate a good team and a good idea, and kind of underscore the probability for success, or in some way make it more probable. So I don't look too much at pitches, to be honest. I don't put too much into that. I look at it as the pitch as kind of a framework for understanding the concept, and then I do my own evaluation of how good is the theme, how good is the market space, how good is the fit for the problem, and I take it from there. So I wouldn't really say that I've seen like a pitch that kind of floored me and made me want to put my money into it. It's more about the people behind.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, there are several different points you can talk about. Some startups need money to begin with. Like if you're going into hardware, for example, you need money just to start production. And other startups need money just to make some kind of software MVP. So it really depends on the startup. Like there are some that need money immediately, and there are some who can make some kind of minimum viable product, either using their own time or using their own money. And those kind of startups need money when they want to scale, when they have some kind of proven business model and they just need to up it. So I guess there are kind of 2 answers to that question. It kind of depends on the startup and what their product is. And I'll also say that trying to get money, if you only have a pitch deck, for example, is probably 100 times harder than trying to raise money if you've just earned 1 krona. If you made some kind of product, whatever it is, and you just made 1 krona, it's going to be 100 times easier to get money than trying to get money before earning something. And your business could be failing, like seriously failing, but as long as you're making some kind of money in revenue, that's always going to be a big plus.
Yeah.
How many startups have I launched? It kind of depends if you're looking. That's a tough question because I've launched some companies, I've co-invested in some companies, I've also made projects which are not companies.
Okay.
But I would say companies where I have signed the formation papers, I would say are probably 5 or 6 or 7.
Yeah. Okay.
And then I've probably made investments in between 6, 7, no, probably closer to 10.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I've run basically 3 companies myself.
Yeah.
It's seeing invoices get paid.
Right.
When I send invoices and then I see them being paid in the other end,
Yeah.
that's the best feeling.
Yeah. Okay.
Because then you in some way you've created something that brings value to somebody else, and that money enables you to do more stuff. I remember when we started Biip and that started gaining traction, the primary income on Biip was advertising. So we sold advertising for 10 million kroner a year. And I was doing most of the advertising sales to begin with. And that was a great feeling when suddenly Coca-Cola called us, and McDonald's called us, and Pepsi called us, and lots of companies that wanted to reach young kids in Norway. They called us and said, "Hey, we have an advertising campaign for 300,000 kroner. Can we send you can we send you our banners?" And we said, "Yeah, sure." And for us, it was kind of free money because we just hosted some banners on our site and we got paid invoices in the other end. And I think that was the coolest thing. That was also the first time that I was kind of an entrepreneur, but that was the coolest thing and experience, seeing that somebody else wanted your product. All the time.
Yeah. How did you cope with that?
Well, you just have to fake it until you make it. That's the best thing I can say to anybody. Just never show that you don't know. Just listen and try to understand, and then go home and learn, and then come back the next day and really know. Because we didn't know how to do advertising sales, for example. I never talked with anybody. But I started calling around and booking meetings with lots of media buying agencies. Now I know all of them, of course, but back then I was just doing cold calling and saying, "Hey, can we do a meeting? I'm calling on behalf of Biip. It's a really cool startup. All the kids are using it." And these guys were just like, "No, we never heard about it, but we know that social media is supposed to be really hot now. So okay, we'll do a meeting." And then I did the presentation of Biip and how it was growing and everything, and then we started getting money. But we were just faking it, like 100%. We didn't know anything about anything. Yeah, that's really easy to answer, and that's firing people.
Yeah.
Because we grew from 3 friends. When we were bought, we had 10 employees. And then at maximum we had 15, and we were doing like revenues of 18 million at the time. So we had a profit of 8 million per year. So the business was going extremely well. The next year after we'd been bought up, we went from a revenue of 18 million down to 12 million, and our profits were down from 8 million plus to 3 million in minus in 1 year. So basically it crashed, like really crashed and burned. And there were lots of reasons for that. As I was telling you earlier, some of it was culture, some of it was the financial crisis. and some of it was increased competition from Facebook, and VG launched something called Biip the year after we were bought. So there were kind of three things that happened at the same time. And then we had to start firing people. And we went from 15 employees to 8 employees in 1 year. And then the next year we were down to 5. And I was the CEO at the time, so I had to do all these firings. And yeah, again, that's something kind of you have to fake it until you make it, because nobody told me how to fire anybody. So then I had to start to read up on employment law and what's the formal procedure on doing that. And it was really tough because a lot of those people were my friends. I had hired them. I knew them usually through a common friend. And then I had to be the one that said, hey, times are tough. You need to pack up your stuff. So yeah, that was definitely the hardest part. And this is relevant to all entrepreneurs, I think. When we sold the company, a lot of the money was tied into something called an earn-out agreement. An earn-out agreement means that you get some money when you sign the deal, and then you get, it's getting an allowance. You get some money every year for 3 years. And 5 years after we got our money, the Norwegian government decided to reclassify quite a big part of our deal from capital gain, which in Norway is taxed 27%, to work income, which is taxed in Norway by 48.2% or something. So it's basically a 20% increase in the taxation. So 5 years after we sold the company, I got a tax bill of 1.5 million kroner. That, of course, we could never foresee. It was impossible to foresee. So that hit me really hard because I wasn't really expecting it. And no matter how much money you have, you're always going to really feel 1.5 million kroner. Anyway, we hired a lawyer to help us sort through this matter and try to find out, okay, is there any loophole here? Is there some way we can dodge this tax bill? And I remember the bill was for one letter. He wrote one letter on our behalf, and it was for 95,000 kroner. And I was like, shit, 95,000 kroner for one letter. I should do this myself. And then I started reading up on this subject. And eventually I decided, okay, I know so much now, I'll just try to pass the law exam. And I passed the first year, and then the second year and the third year, and now I'm on the 5th year. And I'm finished as a lawyer in 2 months, actually. So it was kind of a learning process where I just had to learn the stuff. And then eventually I started liking learning the stuff, and then I passed all the exams. So, but yeah, the key takeaway for entrepreneurs is that there are very serious legal and taxation issues associated with starting your own company. Not only, of course, employment law, but also taxation and ways of taxation, taxating income. And the most important thing, just like as a heads up to all startup entrepreneurs, if you ever sign a deal where you are obligated to work at that company, it could be for 1 year or 2 years or 3 years, you risk the chance of part of the proceeds. If you ever sell those stock, you run the chance of that money being reclassified from capital gain to work income, and you might be slapped with extra 20% tax bill. It can take 3 years, it can take 5 years, but you're going to get the bill like we did. So it's really important for all entrepreneurs to have a lawyer on your side that can help you, especially when you make deals. Whenever you sign your name somewhere, you should get a lawyer to look at that. And I mean, usually it will cost you like 1 hour or 2 hours of a lawyer's time, but it will be 100% worth it. So please do that. I usually work 10 or 11 hours a day. And for me that's necessary, but I'm also very fortunate because my work is also my hobby, so it's not like working for 10 hours, it's more like doing my hobby for 10 hours every day. But yeah, I don't know, I just try to fit everything together and work fast. And I also use a small app called Rescue Time, which tracks everything I do. And I get a weekly report saying how much time I spend on Facebook, for example. So last week I spent 2 hours on Facebook, and that's kind of as soon as you see that report, a mental process starts in your head. Like you start to prioritize a little bit better, or at least you're more conscious of the time that you spend. So I would recommend that app to anybody, Rescue Time. Yeah, and there's I have several good pieces of information because I see what people do wrong all the time, and I would say that there's a quote by Sun Tzu, which is really good, that I like, and it's that every battle is won before it is ever fought. And by that he wants to underscore the importance of preparation before you do stuff. And it's really, really important. I see a lot of people just jump into the entrepreneurial game because, I don't know, some people look at it as more of a lifestyle than an actual work, I think. And in my opinion, that's totally wrong. You should start a company because the goal shouldn't be to be an entrepreneur. The goal should be to, for example, give yourself financial freedom or work with something that you love doing. It shouldn't just be about the lifestyle being an entrepreneur. That's why you call it a wantrepreneur. But I would say, like, the key thing being an entrepreneur is preparation and looking at it seriously, and not just jumping into it, but taking your time, planning, writing your pitch deck, growing a network, taking your time doing it right. Because if not, your company will fail, 100% guaranteed. So yeah, I think that's the most important thing for wannabe entrepreneurs, is just don't rush into it, take your time, make sure that there's a need for whatever product you're trying to sell or make, and do it right.